Welcome back to the Manor Entropians. Julian McBain here, and today I want to talk about avatars. But before we do, I am out here hunting Kerberos to work on the Kerberos challenge and to work on my short blade skills and my scanning skills. So let's talk a little bit about avatars. I was thinking about this actually for a part of the evening, and I've been deciding what to go into for this particular episode, because I'm taking this new kind of tack about how I'm doing videos for a while. And it occurred to me as I was thinking about things that, of course every player has their own method in which they customize their avatar and how they level them up. But then it occurred to me that of the three avatars I know best, I know my avatar and the two biggest YouTubers for Entropia universe, Serial Overdrive and Lorespin. I know I've watched enough of their content to have a pretty good feel of how their avatars operate and how they play their avatars. I'm not psychic. I don't have the ability to gain insight into their methodologies individually, but from a broad perspective, it occurred to me that the way we play our avatars actually reflects pretty heavily on who we are as actual people. And that kind of took me by surprise, because I know that's how I play my avatar, but the purpose of playing a sci-fi game is to be someone you can't be. But in real life, there's a real limit to the amount that you can role play in this type of a setting. You're going to do what makes you comfortable to a certain respect, and that means you're going to default to what you know. So, as a person, I am most comfortable when I'm doing something methodical that I can focus in on. There's a distinctive beginning and end, or there's a reason for it to be perpetual. From a combat perspective, I prefer to be up close and personal. I'm a sports fighter, I'm a fencer, I'm a fencing instructor, and thus it makes sense that my avatar is based around a tanky, tow it with the enemy type of build. And so I've built my avatar around those notions, where I'm focused on long blades, and now I'm building short blades because there are skills that short blades help you build that long blades are less strong against. And I think that's why short blade wielders tend to have higher damage professions, whereas long bladers have higher hit professions. And by balancing them out a little bit, I'll manage to level out the amount of the skills across the spectrum, so that I am good no matter what tool I have in close combat. And actually, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, not an exaggeration, but a little bit untrue. In fighting and sports fighting, I'm a fencer, but I use a rapier and a dagger. So the rapier, of course, is a long, thinnish sword, but it's not like a fencing foil for Olympic fencing or an epee. It's the actual size of the blades that they used at the time. And then in my offhand, my left hand, I hold a dagger, and the dagger's about 16 to 18 inches long. I can't remember the exact length of the blade. And it has a sail on it to cover my hand. And that's what I use mostly as a defensive weapon. But if you can get in close and personal, then it's a great weapon to use against your opponent, because you can stab your opponent with it in historical fencing. Actually, one of my student is actually better at using her dagger than I am. More often than not, I've found myself on the point of the dagger and going, "Wait a second, that's not supposed to happen." But anyway, that it occurred to me that I've really built my avatar around the way that I face challenges, and I face challenges by going toe to toe with them. Now that's why I've done other things other types of combat sports. I've done armored combat, SCA armored combat, which is you dress in armor. There's certain minimums, and I tend to tank up a little bit because I'm of slight build. I only weigh 160 pounds and I'm 6 feet tall, so I'm of slight build. But you know, I jump into the, you know, I'll get into the Eric and I'll wail away because we carry rattan weapons, which is a type of palm, or it's very similar to bamboo actually, and it happens to have the same weight ratio as steel for size, and so it simulates steel weapons very well, but it's a lot safer for obvious reasons. And so I'll do that. Main reason I haven't done it in a while is because they changed the rules for helmet padding, and I don't have the time or the money right now to update my helmet like you all really care. But anyway, that's who I am. I tow it. I face my, you know, I jump in and I face the risk and I face the challenge up close and personal, and that's the way I like to do things. And so in Entropia Universe, that's how I tailor my avatar. I build the avatar in such a way that I can take the damage, which is why I focus on hit points, and I can tow it with my opponent, and I'll continue to take the damage and let that damage happen until I can take the damage with less pain, simulated pain. And that's basically what additional hit points are, and that's what the ring that I have. I wear an angelic ring, which is based on the Aegis, which is the shield that Athena, the Greek goddess of war and wisdom, carried. Depending on the legend, it was often made with, or it was often covered in goat fur, which is hilarious because goat's delicious. So anyway, so that's how I build my avatars. I focus on those things. You know, I'm not really focused on, you know, things like mining or gathering. I'm not focused on crafting, although I do try to build my crafting skills from time to time because I do see there's wisdom in that. And that's honestly, if you take the time and investment and build your crafting skills, that's where the money in the game really is. But you're going to be dumping a huge amount of ped to get there. And I really have to say the people who take the time... Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. The people who take the time to actually take the time to go in and grind out those crafting skills, I tell you, they've got far more patience than I do. Or at least from my own perspective. Now, yeah, you can set crafting up to, like, do all the iterations, and then you can, you know, just walk off for 20 minutes and then come back and recycle the scraps. But realistically, if you're smart about it, if you really want to maximize your profits, you have to pay attention. And you really have to pay attention. And I can appreciate the work they do, and I just don't. I know for a fact that I don't have the patience. I wish I did. And so it got me to thinking about, you know, how do other, like, dude, really? You've got a mob right there. How do other players build their avatars, and do they really build them based around their personalities? And I got to thinking about it, and I thought about Serial Overdrive first, because he was the first Entropia, he was the first real Entropia content creator I ever watched. And he was probably one of the reasons I ended up creating this channel. And so, you know, he's a very well-traveled person. You know, he's been to all kinds of places. He's seen all kinds of things. I am sure that I am willing to bet, if I had to make a guess, because of his travels, he's probably been in places that are if I had to guess, he's probably been in places that are more dangerous than any of us are usually used to having to contend with outside of, say, a combat zone. And that's really interesting. And so I thought about it, and I think about the way he builds his avatar. And he builds a very well-balanced avatar. He balances between combat, you know, his combat skills and his mining skills. I don't know that he does any crafting. I don't think he does. Serial, if you're watching this, feel free to correct me. But he builds a very well-balanced avatar, and he's focused, his combat skills are mostly focused on evade. Because that's the general wisdom, especially when you're in another country. You know, things aren't like in America elsewhere, where if you defend yourself, they're going to side with you. There are places in the world where if you defend yourself against an assault, you're just as guilty. Which is absurd, but it happens. There are places like this. And so, when looking at he fights in a way that focuses on his personal safety, and that's not unintelligent. That's not, you know, some people might consider it cowardly. It's not cowardly. It's actually a very intelligent way to fight. It's very chess-like. And honestly, again, it's one of those things where I kind of wish I had enough patience to do it that way. Because he assesses what he does before he goes and does it. And he rarely miscalculates. I mean, it does happen. We all make screw-ups, but you'll notice that the number of times during a hunt that he dies to combat damage is very low. And so I find that very interesting that is very... I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just the way it comes out in his gameplay, or if we don't see a lot of the way he plays because he doesn't play that way for... unless he's actually doing it for his channel. But... and, I mean, if you watch the way he plays Rust, too, it's also very calculated. I mean, it's obvious that he's an engineer, or software developer. But that is I would contend that is a discipline of engineering, because he's very calculated in everything he does. And it's if you really break down how that works, it's very, the meticulousness of it, I think, is incredible. And I think we could all stand to learn something from it. Because every risk he takes is absolutely calculated. Or at least it appears that way. And then if you... by contrast, it's almost the exact opposite. If you look at the way Lorespade plays, and the way that he built his avatar. And taking into account that Lorespade is a combat veteran. And unless you have done it, and I have not been in actual life or death combat, because it does not compare. There is no comparison. The sports combat I do doesn't compare to what Lorespade has done. It's absolutely life-altering. And I've spoken to a number of combat veterans, including ones that had just come back from overseas. And you hear the stories of the intensity of the experiences that they had over there. And some of them are very gung-ho about it, and others are very reserved. And I think it all comes down to the individual experience as the person and how they processed it, and how they process things in general. Because... you know, some of them are very gung-ho, and they're all about, you know, the how primal it is and how basic it is. And there is something about such a thing that is rooted inside of ourselves, but at the same time that it's deeply affecting. It really changes you. But if you look at the way that Lorespade plays his avatar, again, he also plays to a certain respect. He plays up the amount of defense he has. Like he over armors, and I'm not saying that as a criticism. It's a play style, because of course for the most part, any type of damage you take, or any durability damage you take, is going to be fed back to you either in skills or in loot. But on the same token, if you think about it, he's much more aggressive than, say, Serial Overdrive is. And to a certain extent, he's actually more aggressive than I am, because he goes after much larger prey. And, you know, I like me, I'll go after prey, you know, and I'll tow it with my opponent. But I'll rarely go after something that is overly dangerous to me. Like, I know that there's a margin of safety there. And that's a very sports combat attitude. You know, yes, we do something dangerous, but there's a margin of safety because we wear protective equipment. Lore Spade's been in a place where no amount of protective equipment... There might be situations where no amount of protective equipment could save you. And I mean that in a very real sense. I mean, you just have to look at combat footage. It's all over YouTube. You know, if you know where to find it. And so I think that I believe that plays into his method of gameplay, and you can see it also in the way he plays Fallout 76. And Lore Spade, if you're watching this, please correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm overanalyzing, or if I'm inappropriately injecting this, you know, either of you, Serial or Lore Spade, please let me know. But it's... And it's the way that each of them plays that really speaks to the things that they have faced in their lives. And it struck me. I was as I was thinking about it, it really struck me dumb. It's like, oh my God, we're playing our avatars as if they are actually ourselves living in this world. And then when I compared it to the other games that we each play, again, we each play in ways that we contend with the real world, or at least from what I can tell, due to the experiences I know of. And I won't pretend that I know Serial Overdrive or Lore Spade very well. I won't pretend that I know them in real life, because I don't. But of the experiences that I know they've had because of the things that they've said on their channels, and then when I compare it to the way I do things and the experiences I've had, that was the conclusion I came to. And I'm willing to bet that if you really dig down into how you play your avatar, the chances that you play your avatar in Entropia universe like you do you would do things in real life if you were actually to be sucked into the world of Entropia universe, I think you'll find that they are remarkably similar. Maybe not the same, you know, because you don't have a fear of actual death in this game. You don't have a fear of... The amount of permanent risk in this game is very limited. And so that does affect how we contend with the virtual world that is presented to us here. But, unlike other games, there is real consequence. And it does cost us actual money, and therefore, I think that it really lends itself to a more realistic version of ourselves coming out in our avatars. And I think that's really interesting. You know, in Sword Art Online, the main character Kirito, Kirigaya Kazuto is the quote unquote player, and Kirito's the avatar he had in his games, stated that the line between the virtual world and the real world is ephemeral at best, or it's thin at best. I don't remember the exact word, and I'm sure there was some lost in translation, but it's thin. It's razor thin, and the more realism you put into a game, like having a real cash economy, the more razor thin it's going to get. Because there's nothing people take more seriously than their money. And I mean that in a very real sense, because, you know, and think of what you will of money, but realistically, money is just a measure, and it's a measure of value that you are willing to put into something. And so, and you have to work hard for it. You know, that's no joke. And so for those of us who play, the ability to play the game really is a sacrifice to some other aspect of our lives. Hopefully it just means we're not doing other activities that might require money. You know, maybe we're playing the game instead of watching Netflix or some other, you know, disposable income type thing. I'm not stupid enough to think that there aren't players out there that, you know, eat ramen for 3 meals a day so they can play the game. To assume otherwise would be stupid. There's already plenty of evidence in that in World of Warcraft, and that's just a basic subscription. But it just, because there's real consequence, the idea that we as players might actually be playing the game in a way that reflects who we are as real people becomes much more prevalent. Because, like, if I'm playing a game where you know, there's no actual permanent consequences, like if I play Grand Theft Auto, I'll save the game and then I'll just, you know, do random shit until I either die or, you know, whatever, and then I can reload the game. Or if I'm playing like Fallout 76, if I decide I want a PvP, well, I won't right now because I'm only like level 6, but there's no permanent consequence for PvP because we're not using real money, and even if I loot another player, the only thing they actually lose is a little bit of time. And that's really what, I mean, what is a video game but losing time anyway in the grand scheme of things. It's why I prefer Entropia Universe overall, because there's, in addition to the real consequences of the game, you have the ability for actual return in the long run. And yes, it takes time, and yes, it takes patience, and yes, it takes intelligent use of your resources to produce a positive outcome. But in the long run, it's no different than real life. I mean, overall. And so, and I think that's really why we play the game the way we do. And I think that's also why if there is a game out there where your real actual personality is going to come to the surface, for better or for worse, this is the game it's going to come out in. Because not only do they give us this platform with real life consequences, they all, well, with broadly speaking real life consequences, because you get the money aspect, but they also take away the legal consequences. Piracy is legal in Entropia Universe because there are no laws. This is the perfect laissez-faire, lawless society, and the only thing we're bounded by are the limitations of the engine and certain rules about where we do things, because that's how they designed it. So, yeah, I guess there are laws, but they're not instilled in the same way that they are in real life. And so yeah, I think the avatar builds really reflect how we actually contend with the world, the real world, or they reflect how we would prefer to contend with the real world if we had the opportunity to contend with them in such a way. And I'm actually just constantly scanning this thing instead of fighting it because I'm not paying attention. And so I think that warrants a lot of thinking. If you look at your avatar, think about how you built your avatar, and then think about how you would actually be living your life if this was the world that you actually lived in. And if I had to make a guess, dollars to donuts, you'd most likely live your life the exact same way you have your avatar live. And then think about how you live your real life and ask yourself, are you living your life in a way that reflects the way you try to live as your avatar? And then ask yourself if that's a good thing. For better, you know, whether you do or not. I've long held that it is my personal belief that as video games have developed, they have become more and more a reflection on who we actually are as people. And very realistically, over time, that will become more and more true. Because, I mean, hell, back in the 80s, there was only so much you could do in a video game. You know, bouncing around and hitting question mark blocks with your head only goes so far. You can't really reflect your personality in a game like that. The world is very limited. But the technology has come so far, and we have moved so fast. It really makes you wonder what other things are out there. You know, what other things are we learning about ourselves by playing these games? Because, you know, games have rules, and when you play a game, you agree to a set of rules, and the set of rules are the ones laid out in how the game is played. And that's actually how real life actually is that you know, you go into life and there's a set of rules, and you have to agree to play by the set of rules that society has given us to play with. And you can break those rules, and there are consequences for breaking those rules. And in a video game, the consequences for breaking the rules usually means you either get thrown out of the game because of terms of service, or the engine just objectively refuses to let you do it. And so in a game like EU, or a platform like EU, we build ourselves around how we actually contend with things, because it is the best way we know how to deal with things. And then we do so in this world with limited rules. And thus we can let our real personalities come out. I need to head back to base. I need to kill this level 6 first. Tell me what you think. And really, if Lorespade or Serial Overdrive are watching this, and if I stepped over the line, please let me know so I don't do it again. You know, I've got you both on Twitter, DM me. But when it struck me, I had to talk about it. I had to analyze it verbally, because I'm a verbal processor, and that's how I analyze things as I come across them. And I think because of that, I'm able to share the things that process inside my head. But I would challenge each of you. That's a lot of curves. Let's drop a sleep near here. I would challenge every Entropian to reflect upon their avatar build and think about how they would live their lives if this place was a real place that we lived. And really think about it. I think you'll realize that your avatar reflects your own personality far greater than you actually expect. Okay, I'm done. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Guys, I really appreciate all the support. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate all the support. You all have a wonderful night.